All right, let's call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. It's now 7:31 p.m. It is Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge is being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to Borough Council chambers unavailability and is in compliance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act and associated regulations. Notice of this remote meeting was published in the Bergen Record, posted on the front door of the Borough Hall, and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial-in and login information necessary for public participation and access to this meeting remotely. The copy of the agenda for this meeting was made available on the borough's website near the posting of the meeting notice and included the dial-in and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand button on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. The board will address you by name or by the last four digits of your telephone number. You may mute and unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon on Zoom or dialing *6 on your telephone keypad. You must state your name and address clearly prior to making a public comment. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Steinle and ask her to call the roll, please.
Thank you. The mayor is absent excused tonight. Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Mr. Cray. Oh, I thought I saw him. All right. No,
Don't see him yet.
I guess he's absent at the moment. Ms. Boland is also excused tonight. Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Here.
Mr. Kaniga,
Here.
Councilman Glass,
Here.
Mr. Gautier,
Here.
Mr. Salva.
Here.
Thank you. Also present, our zoning officer, Mr. Dupkin, our board planner, Mr. Behrens, and our board engineer, Mr. Costa.
Okay, great. First off, just appreciate everybody hopping on tonight. I know we've got a very light agenda, but helpful just to kind of keep things clear and efficient and moving along as we get a little bit later into the year. I know things are going to potentially get a little busier, so try to keep the docket as clear as we can. With that, the first item for this evening is the approval of minutes from our March 12th, 2025 meeting. Draft set of the minutes was circulated for review prior to this evening's meeting, and I open it to the board for comment or questions. I have one minor comment, which is under the old business section on page 7, just the first line. My relationship causing my recusal was actually a professional relationship with a board member, not personal. So
Okay,
just
I can fix that. I'll fix that.
Make that one change. And if there are no other comments, questions, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes with that one change.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gautier.
And everyone is eligible to vote.
Okay.
I'm
so-
going to abstain just because of my failure to make time to carefully review the minutes. Apologies.
Okay, so we'll just do a voice vote noting the abstention of Councilman Glass. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Thank you. We're going to move now into our discussion section of the agenda. This evening we have on for discussion the preliminary state development and redevelopment plan as our first item, and I will turn the floor over to Mr. Behrens.
Sure. Good evening, board members, chairman. So since our last meeting, I had sent a link, I believe, to the group with the states, what they're calling the preliminary draft state development and redevelopment plan. And if you recall, the last time the state adopted its plan was in 2001. And again, they were supposed to do it every 3 years or so. There had been prior iterations, but were never adopted. And, you know, so obviously the world has changed. New Jersey's changed quite a bit since 2001. But I believe the primary reason they're trying to get it done now is as it relates to affordable housing. They figured sort of after the fact that in order to pursue the legislation and have towns adopt new fourth-round housing plans, that they should update the state plan because there's a relationship with the different planning areas as far as allocating affordable housing obligations to municipalities. So I think in some respects, the exercise that we're embarking on is a bit of a formality, but we should do it nevertheless. And the way it works is that municipalities are supposed to work with their assigned negotiating entity. So in this case, it would normally be Bergen County, but they've outsourced this task to a private planning firm, Hire and Gruel. I think they're based in Red Bank. But in any event, there's a questionnaire that's 11 or so questions, which I'll share my screen just so the board's familiar with what's entailed in all this. And so it's, the borough's responsibility basically to submit this to Hire and Gruel in a timely manner. They didn't give us a deadline, except I believe they set a public meeting or a meeting with municipalities sometime early April, and ultimately they have to give their feedback to the state by May 30th. So there's not a ton of time to do this. But if you could see this form, a lot of the questions are administrative in nature. So a question of, what plans have you adopted and when? Okay, that's something we could do. Review the 10 goals of the state plan and indicate the degree to which the municipal and county plans incorporated key concepts and objectives. So, a couple sentences on that. And the feedback has been from the State Office of Planning Advocacy that these are not meant to be lengthy responses. They're meant to be very general in nature. And again, I suspect that they're going to review these, say thank you very much, and adopt their state plan in December. There may be some opportunities to change some of the language or specific policies slightly, but a lot of it I think is the agenda of the current administration, hence the reason to get it adopted in December. And the other opportunity for influence would be to change the state mapping. So I'll show you the state map in a minute once I run through these. So again, just to breeze through these, I think really the only question where we might ask the board's input on it pertains to what are the towns. So number 8, please indicate your community's 3 most important local and regional land use planning goals and priorities. So I mean, that's something I could take a stab at, but I think that's where the board could chime in and, collectively indicate what the borough's top priorities are. So this information, once assembled, in a response template format, will get sent to Hire and Gruel. They'll collect that and they'll send one package, county-wide response template to the state, to review agreements and disagreements. So to the extent that there are any disagreements, they'll try to work those out, again, in terms of any phrasing or policies that people don't agree with generally. The state will take that into consideration. There'll be subsequent public meetings from the state. In September, they're going to release what's called their infrastructure assessment. So that'll be available to review by the public. There'll be subsequent public sessions over the fall, and then eventually there'll be a final draft for everyone to review and opine on. And I believe they're going to adopt it in December, no matter what. So, Chairman, I guess if you want to spend a few minutes, we could talk about planning priorities or put that in the board's mind so we could come regroup and talk about it at a future board meeting.
Yeah, I think given that we've got sort of a small group this evening, I think that was a helpful
We'll table that.
summary, Tom, of what we're looking to do here. So let's table for now, and we can
Yep.
come back when we've got a larger audience and membership of the board in attendance.
Okay.
Give you-
And if anyone's
Quick
interested in that,
question on that, is
Yeah.
this what Ryan and I volunteered to do as part of whatever we volunteered a few weeks ago for?
if it pertains to the state plan, then
Yeah.
I would assume so. Unless was that affordable housing or the state
It's
plan?
affordable housing.
I-
That was
think that was
affordable housing.
affordable
Yeah,
housing.
So,
Yeah, this is different.
This is different,
Yeah,
okay.
so-
Yeah,
I would invite any of you to, send
Mm.
feedback to me directly. Don't copy everybody. If you want to take a stab at reviewing this, all of the documents are in the various links that I sent, including the draft plan, which is the PDF's 168 pages, but the meat of it's somewhat less than that. Basically, there's 10 or so policy goals. They call them the 2050 statewide planning goals, strategies and priorities pertaining to economic development, housing, infrastructure, et cetera. I'd say it leans pretty heavily toward housing, equity, underserved communities, and similar themes. But again, there's more generic planning themes like economic development, climate change, environmental resource conservation, et cetera. So it's, some of the goals are so general that they're hard to argue with, I would say. But again, for anyone that wants to read them, you know, one thing they've touched on in certain parts of it are sort of pushing for ADUs or accessory dwelling units, as they've called them. So they're not making them mandatory, but suggesting that they're a good thing. And there's different feelings about that, you know, throughout the state and the country, as far as implementation. So that's really the crux of it. I don't think we need to make too much of it, but we should get it done. And Chairman, you could either direct us or somebody from the borough or some planning board member to fill this thing out and send it in. However you want to do it is fine.
Okay, Tom, just before you, I know a couple people with some questions here. Could you just briefly touch on what an ADU is, just for the benefit of
So
everybody?
an ADU is an acronym for accessory dwelling unit. And there's been draft bills that have been floated around in New Jersey for the last couple of years now. That would basically allow these things in a variety of manners, and the bills have sort of evolved. But what an accessory dwelling unit is, basically take a single family house. You'd be able to carve out an area of that house or a detached garage and create a separate living unit, meaning a self-sufficient unit that would have a full bathroom, kitchen, and sleeping quarters, essentially. So again, it could be the conversion of a garage, detached or attached. It could be part of a basement. It could be part of a house. And it depends on, you know, how that gets regulated, if it gets regulated. The first few bills sort of read as a blanket statement, and I think a few states have enacted this, where basically do away with single family zoning throughout the state, just as a blanket thing, and you can allow up to, let's say, 4 units or have accessory dwelling units. And, you know, to do that as a blanket proposition, I think has its own issues, anywhere from parking to, you know, sewer and water and school kids and all that, you know, serious implications, in my opinion. So not to say that it's not appropriate in some locations. So there are some towns in New Jersey that have already implemented that voluntarily. There's some shore towns that have it, you know, where you can convert your garage or whatever. I know Princeton, Montclair, I think, allow them among, you know, maybe 5 or 10 that allow them outright. So it's, you know, in a way, I think this plan sort of sets the stage for a forthcoming bill. But again, none of the bills that have been kicked around so far have had any traction at this point. But it's an idea that's out there, and several other states have already done it. So I don't know where New Jersey sits, and certainly if there's a change in the administration or politically come, you know, next year, that might change things too. So, but just something to be aware of.
Okay, thanks for that, Tom. Councilman, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Just a suggestion for Tom, if possible, and if others agree. You know, there's a lot of people on the board. And I think open discussion on how to answer these questions might not be the most efficient way for us to get it done.
Yep. Okay.
So I think, Tom, if you could float draft responses, that'll help us, I think,
Yep.
be a lot more focused and get through this a lot more quickly and efficiently. That's just my suggestion. I think that would be very helpful to the board, though, personally.
Okay, that makes sense. And as I said, most of the questions are administrative in nature. You know, what plans did you adopt and when, kind of type of questions. So
The one that you mentioned, though, where there might be, you know, the need for some input, if you could like float up a draft,
yeah,
I think that would be helpful.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Gibbons.
More hands.
Yeah, just on a similar note, you know, if there were some things that we have implemented that, or things that have been floated around that could go into that answer, it certainly would be helpful. Just a general question. I mean, how much say do we really have in this? I mean, is this really just a formality and they're going to just do whatever they want? You know,
That's my honest sense. Again, having talked to the sort of the head honcho of the state who's coordinating this whole thing, back in 2001, it was a very thorough, more in-depth process. Not that I was involved directly, but you know, where they actually solicited input, and the process took maybe a year and a half, and it really did guide the implementation of the plan. This is, hey, we forgot to do this. We should have done it before the housing stuff, but
yeah,
the courts,
it just seems like you're gonna do the formality, fill this stuff out, and 70 of these are gonna get bundled together, and then however many in the state. I guess we have to do it, but I'm not sure how much time and energy should be spent on it if it's just a formality.
I wouldn't lose sleep over it, but get it done and say thank you very much and send it
Yeah,
off and see what
That
happens. So I
sounds
think-
like better use of time.
Right.
Thanks.
Mr. Pfeffer.
Yeah, thanks. Just two quick things. I do feel that it is important that we, maybe not lose sleep over it, but that we do record our sentiments for whatever it's worth. I mean, it may be a total waste of time, but on the other hand, we are on the board, we represent the community, and we should submit, some well thought out points and suggestions. So I'm sort of in between, like not wanting to totally waste our time, but at the same time put in some effort into it to do our jobs basically, to speak for the community on these issues. And having said that, one suggestion that I have is, Tom, you mentioned that there's with respect to question number 8, which you mentioned is sort of asking for our top priorities, that there are some standard categories that exist. And I'm just wondering if we have the capacity technologically to send around a survey to the board members, using something like SurveyMonkey or one of those apps, where we can just list those priorities that are already listed as standard areas of priority or areas of concern, and have the members, vote on which 3 or 5 are their top choices. And, the app totals it up, so it's not a matter of going through it and calculating or counting the votes. The app does that. And then we can maybe get a sense of what collectively our top 5 priorities are. That might
I
make it
think-
faster, and even people who are not here tonight can vote on that and participate that way.
I think that's a great idea to streamline the conversation. Yeah, and like you said, the goal's already written. It's just a matter of picking and ranking. So I think that's an efficient way of doing it.
I don't
Thank
know who will do that, but
I could throw that together. I've done it for other
Okay.
causes.
great.
And I'll just note that any member of the public can also go on the state website and provide comments directly to the state. There's a channel to do that. So any board member, as a member of the public, anybody in the community can again chime in and provide their feedback.
Okay. Anything further on this topic?
No, just what I'll do, as suggested, we'll prepare draft responses and a survey ahead of the board's next meeting.
That sounds like a plan.
What do we have? April 9th, looks like.
Yes, I believe that's the next meeting, April 9th. Yep, Ed's shaking his head, so that is the date. Okay. Great, so we'll move on now under discussion to our draft ordinance updating swimming pool regulations. We have a draft ordinance that was circulated prior to this evening's meeting for review, and Ms. Steinle, I don't know if you have a statement to make on the.
Yes, so I can just go through some of the changes that are included in this proposed revision, which were brought about based on a discovery that the language that we had changed in the ordinance last year wasn't really reflective of what the board's intent was. So the first thing we're doing is updating the definition of building area and building coverage. So under building area, we're including decks and porches and getting rid of patios, because the thought is that things that are actually physically connected to the principal dwelling should be included in the building coverage, or should be included in the understanding of what the building area is. Then when we go to the building coverage definition, we're explicitly saying swimming pools are not going to be included in the definition or calculation of building coverage. And there's a reference to the actual section of the zoning code that talks about accessory buildings and structures. Those definitions are changed in both the site plan chapter of the Borough Code and the zoning chapter of the Borough Code. Then if we go down to the changes to the accessory buildings and structures section of the code, we're putting back in swimming pools as being excluded from building coverage so as to not penalize people for having a pool. It's still calculated, it's still included as part of the lot coverage or impervious coverage, I believe. Is that right, Tom?
Right, once it moves to 27A, I believe it's then captured in the definition of lot coverage. I'm
Of lot coverage.
gonna check.
So
that out.
then, and then another change that we added to things that are not considered part of building coverage are unroofed patios. Since it's with the exception of patios that are more than a foot above grade. So if it's just a flat patio next to your dwelling, that's not going to be considered building coverage, but it's going to be considered just part of the regular lot coverage. If you have a deck or a porch that's attached to the attached or not to the structure of your on the property, then that's going to count towards building coverage. So that was the change in section B. And that is similar to what we've been doing in the past, is calculating decks and porches as building coverage. But we want to make sure that the language is actually in the code. Then there's a clarification that air conditioning units, HVAC equipment, those type of electrical boxes are considered accessory building or structure for the purposes of setbacks, but not for the purposes of calculating building coverage. So then we can give people so then people are not penalized for having the HVAC. And Mr. Dupkin, did you have a question?
No, I had a comment. You're talking about patios. I would suggest that you put in for building coverage, raised patios would be included as building coverage.
Okay.
Reason being is because it's would be part of or against the structure, and these setbacks would need to be maintained. You couldn't put that up against the property line.
Okay. So where it says, where the length, so under 27B1, where we're adding roofed or unroofed porches, I'll also include raised patios greater than 1 foot above average grade. Because in
Steve, does
some
that-
instances, like patios there can be a slight grade change in someone's backyard. So one side of the patio might be a little bit raised up compared to the rest, but if it's a significant raised patio, then that should count. Is that acceptable, Steve?
I would say yes in most circumstances, but I'm sure something's going to come up where, maybe two sides are, on a slope or raised quite a bit and others are at grade. So I think, instead of getting into a detailed definition, it would just be my interpretation that it counts as building coverage.
If it's raised, Steve, you're saying if it's raised, I guess the question is just having a threshold, you know what I'm saying? Like, at what point does it go from being at grade to raised, or is it just,
A foot above grade, I wouldn't put anything. If it's at grade, it's a patio, it's only counted in lot coverage. If it's raised in any manner, then I would suggest that it would be counted as building coverage.
But the problem is with the slopes, it could be partially raised and partially a grade. What about a
Right.
percentage to address that question? If
Say
it's
that again?
If it's over 50% raised, or if it's over 70% raised, then it's a raised, or, you know, the other way around. You look at a percentage of the space that the patio is raised to determine that. I mean, you know, River Edge is all like this, so every
Yeah.
backyard has slopes.
Yeah, you know, then you're getting into minute details with percentages, and that usually throws a lot of architects off. You know, a lot of you know, describing and you know, trying to explain the codes to them. As I said, if it's at grade level, you know, that's fine. If it's above, you know, it's something that would need to be possibly come to the board and you know, determine. But to start putting, you know, details of percentages and, you know, that might be a little bit complicated to the you know, to the residents.
Steve, just one question about the setbacks, and it was always unclear to me in the ordinance. On the one hand, the ordinance says when you have something that's attached, like a deck or a patio, it's supposed to comply with the principal building setbacks. But there's another section that says patios shall have a setback of 5 feet from the side and rear lot lines. And it was my understanding that that applied to decks too, because decks were silent in the ordinance. I just wonder how you've been treating them and how decks and patios should be specified as setbacks if they're
So-
attached.
If they're attached, if they're raised, then it would be, you know, they meet the setbacks of the building.
The
As
principal
far as
building. Okay.
as far as at grade, you know, we try to keep it at that 5 foot.
Yeah.
And same if a deck is at grade level also, you know, you could, you know, take it as, you know, 5 foot setback.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Marina, where were you?
All right, so I guess the question is whether the board wants to recommend that unroofed patios not more than 1 foot above grade. Or well, I guess I'll say whether raised patios at grade should just be considered part of building coverage, or if we want to say raised patios greater than 1 foot above average grade should be considered part of building coverage.
Well, if it's raised, it's not at grade. So can you say that again?
Raised patios greater than 1 foot above average grade. Or if you just, or we could just say, just any raised patio that should be considered building coverage.
I would think raised covers a foot, 6 inches, 10 feet, whatever,
Okay,
Yeah.
right? I mean, raised would imply it's above.
Because you get to the 1 foot question, you're trying to, well, where are we measuring from? You know, you're measuring different places, so I think even though it's an average grade, but
okay, so we'll say unroofed patios at grade do not count, but if you're a raised patio, then you are counted as building coverage. Okay. Then,
Just 2 seconds. I think you gotta define grade.
Or you gotta
Existing
define
grade.
raised.
Grade, existing grade, proposed grade. Cause you can play a lot of games with
Yeah.
that. A lot of ordinances.
I
are
agree.
written- Yeah,
I agree, Rob. I was gonna say, or you have to define raised. One or the
exactly.
other. Okay.
And the only reason I said that many years ago, Tom wasn't even born yet, Palisade Park. The game was, let's build 6-foot walls, 8-foot walls, and that's how you measure height. So it really has to be defined.
do you pick a point, Rob, somewhere on the property and make that determination, or is it measured at different points to come up with? the
There's a lot, I mean, a lot of different ordinances. They go with average grade, go off the building, go 6 feet off the building, go perpendicular to the building. As a matter of fact, Steve Depkin, Oradell, New Jersey, that is some ordinance right there. As far as measuring heights and grades.
That wasn't me.
The key is just how much can you, I think Oradell is what, 1 foot, I think you can, there's different things, it's residential, commercial, but it's a certain amount you can raise it before it doesn't count. So you know exactly where you're at. And I think Oradell's is pretty good at, from my recollection.
You could put down natural grade. So you're not adding
Adding.
to build up a grade, just say natural grade.
Okay.
The good news is Steve is the zoning official, so he's the guy that gets the Class A appeal if it's right or wrong.
Yeah,
And then the board determines from there. But you want to make it easy.
Thanks.
And then one
Thanks,
other
Rob.
thing, yeah, one other thing I saw, it's in-ground pools. And then it has a separate, hot tubs isn't included. But what if Rob Costa wants to build an in-ground hot tub? So that counts? Or the pool has a hot tub attached
My
to it?
interpretation would be, no, it wouldn't count.
Okay. But that's kind of exempt. That's the way I read it before.
Well, you can swim in a hot tub.
Yeah, I would think an in-ground hot tub would be treated just like a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Because if
It
the water's
doesn't
not
say
hot,
that.
it's a small pool.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't say it. So then,
Right.
again, it leaves some interpretation.
as not, so swimming pool, so change it so that it says swimming pools and hot tubs are not included in building coverage. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
In
It
ground.
would be in ground, right? That's, if you build above ground, then it's not exempt. That's the.
So that was one of the questions that I had. Are we, so we're only cutting people a break on building coverage if they build an in-ground pool, but not if they build an above-ground pool. When it essentially is doing the same thing, it's collecting water and it's taking up space.
Well, you're defining it under building coverage, not lot coverage. And I would interpret the above ground pool as an accessory structure. Which would be included in building coverage and could be included in the amenities.
But why would we? I don't want to say punish, but why would it count for an above ground pool and not, like we said, it's doing the same thing. It's keeping the water from going into the ground anyway. I would think.
Well, we're talking about building coverage and the structure. Building coverage is 25%. So if you have something in the ground, I mean, you're looking at the size of the building, garages, decks, things like that. Whereas the pool is, in ground, you don't see it, you don't see the structure. It would be included in lot coverage.
I mean, I thought when we went through the process of having the credit, it would apply to an above ground pool because a lot of people
Okay.
want these in the backyard. So I personally would rather see them get the credit for it and, not push people to have above ground pools, but allow it and give them that credit.
It would be included in lot coverage in the amenities for lot coverage, but it would be calculated as, building coverage. That's the problem with the building and lot coverage. You're going to have two calculations.
Personally, I'd rather see an above ground and an in-ground pool treated the same, personally. Because it's, they're both, yes, you can see one, you can't see the other.
As far as building coverage?
For lot coverage, I mean, we're giving whatever
Yeah, lot
percentage,
coverage.
whatever percentage we gave. I mean, is it 75%? I don't know what number we gave for pools.
See,
75, I believe, and yeah, I would agree with you.
I would think if someone's, going to put up an Intex pool for, a couple of years, or they're going to spend $100,000 and put in a pool in the ground. I think they're essentially doing the same things, personally. And I thought that was what we did before. If I'm wrong, then
I agree with that with lot coverage.
I don't know if that was the original intent of the ordinance, if that's something that can be changed with something like this, but that was my impression.
Well, just to give Marina guidance to wrap this up. So is it building coverage? My thought was that they'd be treated the same, honestly, in ground and above ground, but I think Marina just needs to know for the purposes of the ordinance if above ground would be counted toward building coverage. It's not something I've seen, but I get the distinction. One is above ground, one's in the ground. But I do think the impact would be that it would be somewhat punitive in that on the one hand, they're getting flexibility on the lot coverage, but 25% for the building coverage doesn't leave a lot left for a pool that's taking up some amount of percent. You'll likely end up with variances for above ground pools, would be my.
Yeah, I personally, I'd rather see it as as above ground or in ground as lot coverage, not building coverage.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. We treat the consistency, I think, is important, that they be treated the same, because I agree with Ryan. I think they're basically doing the same. The impact is the same.
Okay, so it seems like there's a consensus that to exclude swimming pools regardless of above or in ground, they're going to be excluded from building coverage, but they're still included in lot coverage.
And I would guess if you're
Yes.
adding anything with hot tubs, I guess it would be the same there as well.
Yeah, swimming
Yes.
pools and hot tub.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then, all right, we've sorted that out. Unroofed patios at natural grade are not considered building coverage, but raised patios or patios above natural grade or something like that will be counted toward building coverage. Then, as I was saying before, HVAC units, air conditioning units are only considered are only considered accessory structures for the purposes of setbacks, but they're not going to be included in calculation of building coverage. Similar reasoning to the pool situation. Then one of the other changes was to the height of the accessory buildings. I spoke with Tom about this, and right now we have it as accessory buildings can't exceed 15 feet in height. But there was no clarification as to the roof pitch of garages. So technically you could have a garage that has a flat roof that's 15 feet tall, and that would be like a giant rectangular box that's 15 feet high. So we recommended that we include garages having a roof pitch of not less than 6/12. And we might need some feedback on that recommendation, but then that brings down the height a little bit of the garages.
Well, and just to clarify, the original height requirement was 12 feet. And I think the board came across an application where the board thought it made sense to encourage pitched roofs and therefore increase the height. But if you increase the height to 15 feet, technically you could have a flat roof, 2-car garage. That's a big bulky thing. I don't think that was the intent. So not trying to be overly prescriptive or, regulate everything, but I think the risk is you get some creative person who builds a big rectangular box. And I don't think that was the intent. If it's too much, we could take it out. But again, I think the intent was to encourage a higher pitched roof for a 2-car garage versus I think the board's issue at the time was a shed roof was proposed where, sort of just pitched one way and was deemed to be a long, flattish thing that was not maybe the most aesthetically pleasing. So is it subjective? To some degree. So if you don't have an issue with the existing language, we leave it. If you think it's better to make it clear that it's for a pitched roof, then that would be the alternative.
I assume
think your
our,
suggestion's better.
I'm sorry. If, I assume it's in there that this can't be turned into a second story. Yeah, I mean, 15 feet, you could have a 7 foot ceiling on the bottom, and 8 foot ceiling on the top, like it can't be turned into an ADU at this point. Is that already in our code to cover someone turning that into living space up there?
Well,
I
Right now,
think
there's only a
there's-
height limitation. So, I mean, we don't allow ADUs at the moment. So I would just say that's as a zoning matter, not a permitted use.
Mm.
Would it prevent somebody from installing, let's say, a loft space? It's not clear on that. I think as long as you meet the coverage requirements and the height requirements, what you do in the garage, you can, except for, limits, you can't have a
Well,
living with a full bathroom.
yeah,
And
there
that's-
is section 5 or subsection 5 of that of 27C5. It's not shown in this draft ordinance because there's no change proposed, but
Okay,
it just states no portion of an accessory building or structure shall be used for living quarters or additional dwelling units, temporary or permanent. So
perfect.
it
Okay,
wouldn't be.
that'd be
it's
my only
already
concern.
did,
Yeah,
yeah.
that someone took the extra height and turned it into something. If it's in there, perfect. Thanks.
The way this is written right now, though, with the pitch not less than 6 on 12, I don't know why we don't just say 1 on 2, but anyway, that does not prevent a lean-to type roof, the way it's written right now.
I see what you're
If
saying.
that's,
Like
Yeah,
just a one-sided.
I get what you're saying. Well, how does the board feel? Let's take a point. Do you want to have a pitch requirement or no pitch requirement? Are you satisfied with just the 15-foot? So I think there's a way to probably come up with better wording to the councilman's suggestion about rectifying that. I think if you do the 1 on 2 over a long enough span, it makes it a little challenging, but you could say something like gable roof or I don't know.
You could do, if I can through the chair, you could do diagrams. Some ordinances have diagrams attached to it.
That probably makes a lot of sense for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'd say
definitely
that.
think we should have the pitch roof as you suggest. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have there's a whole book of proposed development definitions and ordinance suggestions. So, and I know there's diagrams in that, so I can take a look at that and work with Tom and Steve and Rob about picking one that makes sense.
We're talking about accessory structures.
Yes.
What about a shed?
Well, it reads, no such accessory building or structure shall exceed 12 feet in height, except for garages. So in
Okay.
the parentheses pertain to having a roof pitch no less than 6 on 12. So if you're so
Okay.
right, so the pitch provision as written doesn't pertain to sheds. It could.
Right now, sheds could be a maximum of 12 feet in height, regardless of the roof.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so we'll work on revising that section. Going down below, there was also a change to the provision 27C3, where right now it says that accessory buildings shall not occupy more than 30% of the area of the side or rear yard where it's located, or 150 square feet, whatever's less. And so that's pretty restrictive. We want to keep the 30% limitation, but we want to set, the recommendation is that no roofed accessory building shall exceed 150 square feet. So that prevents really large sheds, garages, things like that.
And just to be clear, what it read previously was that, the aggregate, so all, decks, sheds, pools, everything combined can't add up to more than 30% of the yard or 150 square feet, whatever was less. That's how it read previously. So, there are decks and patios and things like that that are a lot bigger than 150 square feet. So I think the 30% limitation still makes sense, meaning you can't develop your whole backyard. You've got to leave some undeveloped area. That makes sense. But now it says that you're not limiting the size of the deck per se to 150 square feet. It would just be something like a shed or detached garage that has that limitation, if that makes sense. Because we've all been on patios and decks and pools that are bigger than 100. That's 10 by 15, right? And certainly the aggregate, when you add up a deck and a shed and a pool and this and that, exceeds 150 square feet. So just to draw that was the thought anyway. That was my, again, not trying to complicate things, but that was something that came up with, I don't know, the last application where this provision came up. With the pool, the one we did last month, I think this came up.
No, I think that makes sense.
And right now,
There's a
this seems,
typo because. Can you not hear me?
No, I can hear.
We can
I'm
do-
sorry.
No, he's freezing.
He's frozen now.
Yeah.
He keeps going out and coming back too. I think he's
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
some issues.
He's got some technical problems.
Hmm.
All right, we'll come back
We
to
can come
him.
back. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I think-
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is far away. No, I was just going to mention where the that markup is related to the 150 square feet. There's just a closed parentheses missing for the deletion.
Okay, I will check on that.
Yeah.
In the Ordell code for accessory structures, a garage is taken as 600 square feet maximum. And any other accessory structure would be 125 square feet.
So in
They permit 3-car garage.
right. In what's not in 3A, we allow 250. So it's
Okay.
300. Yeah, that would be a 3-car garage.
Mhm.
Now, I would say 600 feet, basically 20 some odd feet wide by 25 feet deep. That's a 2-car garage. So 600 is a 2-car garage.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I would say the majority of the size of the lots in town, you're not getting 3-car garages. It would be very limited on what properties could do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay,
Yeah, this has 250, the current ordinance has 250 for 1-car garage, 450 for 2-car garage.
I'm sorry, I was mistaken, but
Cars
So that-
are getting larger.
So I'm sorry, what was is the recommendation to increase that? Increase the 1-car garage? And 2-car garage?
were we looking to change the space in the garage?
I don't know, I think I missed some of that conversation.
Okay. I think
All right,
Steve
we'll
was,
just leave it.
yeah,
Okay. All right, and then the next change proposed was down in section 27D.
I think we're rescinding this because of my misinterpretation. So I think Steve said, you know, if a deck's attached to the principal building, it shall comply with the setbacks, and that's the way the ordinance is read. There seem to be conflicting things, but so this new language could probably be taken out. And just stick with the, is that right, Steve? Just to
Yeah.
keep it the way it is?
Yes, I
If it's
agree.
attached, you follow the building envelope?
Correct.
All right.
Even if it's an unroofed deck?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we'll just get rid of that recommendation. Okay, and then the last change was to, there's a section 28 that specifically talks about swimming pools, hot tubs, and other water bodies, and it's just a clarification in 28B that swimming pools shall not be included in building coverage calculations. So then it ties back into what we changed in 27. So if people are only reading that section, they'll know.
I think for good measure, add the hot tub phrase.
And
to-
hot tubs, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob's hot tub.
Sounds nice.
All right, so I will make those revisions and then recirculate for the next meeting.
Okay, great. Anything further from the board on the ordinance? Okay, let's move on in our agenda then to memorializations. And the first item under memorialization is Nick Valenti. This is Metropolitan Wholesale, 5 Newbridge Road, Block 1303, Lot 3, resolution granting variance relief. Draft of the resolution was circulated to the board prior to this evening's meeting for review, and open it to the board for comment or questions on the draft. There being none, I'll look for a motion to approve the resolution.
Moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kenigo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gaudier.
All right, and I will only call those eligible. Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Kenigo,
Yes.
Councilman Glass,
Yes.
Mr. Gautier,
Yes.
and Mr. Salva.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The Gomez memorialization was not available for this evening's meeting, so we will have that at a future meeting. The next resolution is for the Rosenbaum Yeshiva of North Jersey. This is 666 Kinnickmack Road, Block 616, Lot 9. A draft of the resolution was circulated prior to this evening's meeting for review. Open it to the board for comments or questions on the resolution.
I do have a couple comments. There were some revisions that I circulated today. And there were a few that came in recently. On page 7, paragraph 40, there was a typo that referenced a sign, so I got rid of that. On page 8, the list of conditions under paragraph 9, it's 9 subparagraph B. I'm gonna make a revision to just say that applicant shall install a 6-foot high black aluminum fence, which is what was testified to and was on the record. So just to make that in our resolution clear. And then the one other change was to 9C to include street trees in the landscaping. So it'll say the applicant shall install additional landscaping, parentheses, street trees, evergreen or other similar all-season plantings or trees. And street trees were specifically mentioned in the motion. It didn't, in the motion, it wasn't specified exactly where those street trees are going to be planted, but Because there had been discussion at the meeting about some at the north, some at the south, but that wasn't explicitly agreed to, so we'll just keep it at street trees and work with the board planner and borough professionals on where to plant those.
Didn't we say there were going to be plantings though every other post?
Yep, that's still in there, so
Okay.
landscaping no less than every other line post.
All right. Thank
Um,
you.
And it should say along the Kindergarten frontage.
Marina, I also think you have to change the reference to Shade Tree Committee. I don't think it's a
Committee,
commission.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Marina, one other condition I just thought of, I think they agreed to having no signage on the fence too. And I know that might be overkill, but just to,
I don't
They
think we ever
sometimes are-
discussed it.
they're, what's that?
I don't think we ever
Uh,
discussed it, did we?
I don't remember that, but if they
Maybe
would
not.
have to come back before the board, if they would have to submit a signage application anyways.
Sometimes there's banners and, but
Oh, that's true.
just let it go.
I think normally they have to submit a temporary sign permit with.
They're
Steve.
supposed to, yeah.
Okay, so those were the changes.
Okay, with those revisions, I'll look for a motion on the resolution, please.
So moved.
Mr. Gibbons, thank you. Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Ms. Steinle?
Okay. And I'll only call those eligible. Okay, Ms. Boland is absent. Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Councilman Glass,
Yes.
Mr. Gautier,
Yes.
and Mr. Salva.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. That reaches the end of our agenda for the evening. Anything further from the board? Or our professionals?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gautier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstain? We stand adjourned at 8:28 PM. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.